Here's a game that came out in 2022, but was not talked about a lot. It probably won't be even nominated for Game of the Year by any major publishment or get included in any awards ceremony. Yet I believe that Ghostwire Tokyo is one of the best games of this year and will definitely make its way to the underrated Hidden Gems compilations in the future. Ghostwire Tokyo tells the story of a guy named Akito, who gets into a car accident on his way to the hospital to check on his ill sister Mari. In the process, Akito gets possessed by a spirit called KK who takes control of his right hand. Soon after this, a mysterious fog covers Shibuya, turning its residents into spirits. Then a strange masked man who calls himself Hanya appears on all of the screens and uses a spell to summon evil spirits that are based on many Japanese urban legends, and seals away the rest of the population to use them for breaking the barrier between the world of the living and the dead. Our task would be to stop him from doing this and save Akito's sister, who has been used by Hanya for the ritual due to her being in a coma. When I first heard about the game, of course I had no idea what it would be about, but was hooked from the very first trailer. For me, it all started when I saw the announcement of Ghostwire Tokyo at the PlayStation 5 reveal back in 2020. A game made by the godfather of Resident Evil, Shinji Mikami, though it turned out that he only took the producer role. Set in a modern day Tokyo with supernatural horror elements was just what I wanted. Couple that with flashy combat, and Ghostwire Tokyo did look like a really interesting and unique experience. So I eagerly waited for the game's release in spring of 2022. When I first played it back in March of this year, it felt exciting and mysterious at first, with a slight fear of the unknown, scary monsters attacking you, not having a full understanding of what's going on. Essentially, that's the first two chapters of Ghostwire, filling us in on what's happening and what our goal is. It helps that in the beginning the game is pretty linear, without giving too much space to maneuver, allowing the developers to focus our attention on the important things and set up the rest of the game. But then it all kinda broke down for me once I was released into the open world in Chapter 2. When discussing Ghostwire with a good friend of mine, we both said that it felt a bit like Far Cry set in Tokyo, and if my friend was perfectly fine with this, I wasn't, as I really don't like modern Far Cry games for their lack of inventiveness, brain-dead side missions, and a constant urge to force players into clearing endless outposts, communication towers, and other marvelous bullshit in large quantities that the developers crammed into the game to fill up the open world, which would otherwise feel empty and bland. The issue here, in my opinion, is that these endless cardboard cutout fetch quests and towers do exactly the opposite of what the creators of the game intended. How many times have players climbed to the top of a building to interact with some device in order to open up a portion of the map to see more icons with repetitive side quests that usually have no rhyme or reason to them other than quote-unquote adding more variety? It's because of games like modern Far Cry and Assassin's Creed that I've developed a bit of an allergy for this kind of open world experience, as I stopped expecting anything good out of a huge map with many question marks on it.
Nico, it's Roman! Let's go bowling!
That's why I sort of lost interest in Ghostwire for almost half a year and went on to play some other games, while it just stayed installed on my console waiting for me to come back. And then I decided to give it another chance this November, but made the decision to approach the game how I usually play open world titles. That is, focus on the main quest and do side missions only if I come across them on my way to the next story chapter. And you know what? It turned out to be a brilliant game. The main story is gripping with many unexpected twists and thought-provoking topics like the value of life, the importance of family, finding your place in the world, being ready to set personal goals aside for the common good, and so on. I don't know what it is about Japanese writers and game directors that always seems to strike a chord with me, touch a nerve that gets me emotional and at times existential. It might be an okay game in terms of gameplay, But then the story just drives me forward, and the bittersweet ending feels like a farewell to a good friend once I'm done with it. Ghostwire Tokyo is exactly that case. Sure, the gameplay, apart from a colorful yet simplistic and robust combat mixing martial arts and magic, is nothing to really write home about. Open world first-person action game with horror and RPG elements, and a bunch of generic fetch, battle, find quests set in Tokyo. But it's the small details of these basic quests, like references to the Japanese folklore, urban legends and pop culture, coupled with a gripping main story about doing what's right and making sacrifices to save others, that make Ghostwire stand out among other similar games. As everyone's favorite chess club member Todd Howard would say,
it just works.
And indeed it does. Even the more tedious collecting quests don't really feel like a chore and are well implemented into the overall game world. Plus, you don't have to do any of them if you don't feel like it, and there is no level requirement for the main story missions. If you're like me, and usually do side quests only in case you randomly stumble upon them, the game won't punish you for that. Sure, having a higher level and better gear would make life easier when it comes to battling the bosses and tougher enemies, but they're perfectly beatable even without reaching the highest level and getting all of the beads to boost your spells. And that's fine. I mean, I get the idea why some criticize Ghostwire for underwhelming boss fights, but the developers sort of compensate this with the build-up and over-the-top level design of the actual battle arenas. And besides, not every game must have tough-as-nail bosses, right? Speaking of design, Ghostwire Tokyo is a great-looking game. Be it the aesthetics of Shibuya during the night, with the famous crossing and bright lights, or the toned-down quiet residential areas with small shops and old-school houses living in harmony next to the ancient shrines. You actually feel like you're walking down the streets of Tokyo. And when the paranormal shit starts to happen, the designers really let themselves go with the psychedelic transitions, rooms and corridors warping, getting covered in different liquids, doors leading to places where you shouldn't really be. It all adds to the atmosphere of the game and really nails the feeling of running on the edge between two completely different worlds. All of this is complemented by gorgeous lighting, particle effects and reflections that make the game really come to life. I also like what they did with the audio and how a lot of the DualSense features were implemented to enhance the experience. For example, the sound of radio static that is so familiar to longtime Silent Hill fans comes on when the monsters are nearby, or the voice of KK, who constantly communicates with the main character, are both delivered through the built-in controller speaker. The haptic feedback and adaptive triggers are utilized too when you pull a bowstring or use one of the elemental attacks, which makes the combat feel a bit like a rhythm game when timed right. Ghostwire Tokyo is one of those games that most likely won't be in many people's top 10 lists by the end of 2022, simply due to the sheer amount of excellent releases that we got this year, with the titles like God of War Ragnarok, Elden Ring, Horizon Forbidden West, and many more dominating the charts and receiving a universal praise from both the fans and critics. But it is a really unique experience and a great experiment, blending together many genres and delivering one of the best stories of 2022. Sure, it's no 10 out of 10 masterpiece, but Ghostwire Tokyo surely deserves more attention and credit than it gets. If you're looking for something that feels somewhat familiar, but with a new interesting twist and a better story, do yourself a favor and give this game a try.